Imagine there was a place where all the weirdest ideas in warfare were brought together. It might look something like this. Buried in these boxes would be every bizarre weapon you can think of, and some you would never believe. History's most bizarre weapons and plans. Despite their shocking and sometimes disturbing nature, every story we'll tell is entirely true. Nuclear landmines insulated by chickens. Bionic kittens as bugging devices. Bombs made of bats. Cats. Dogs. And pigeons. Exploding pancakes you can cook and eat. And an aircraft carrier made of ice. We are about to delve into the strangest recesses of military history. Every weapon you're about to see was actually considered for combat. But our experts are about to reveal the chosen few. The unique weapons that are so weird, they might just work. If you're gonna build weird, you might as well think big. And ideas don't come much bigger than our first weird weapon. Today's aircraft carriers are some of the biggest ships ever designed. More than 1,000 feet long, with armor 8 inches thick, and carrying 70 aircraft or more. But these are mere dwarfs compared to the brainchild of one British scientist. In 1942, he planned to build an aircraft carrier bigger than the Empire State Building, with impenetrable armor, and he would build it out of ice.
Ice, as in frozen water?
Wait a minute, they tried to use ice to build aircraft carriers. Now, who did this?
His name was Geoffrey Pike. British journalist, part-time spy, full-time inventor. And as weird as it sounds, the following story actually happened during World War II.
Pike was definitely eccentric.
You want to have some crazy people in your military blue sky research department.
Pike wanted to use ice for two very simple reasons. First, steel was in very, very short supply during World War II. And second, ice floats. Remember the Titanic? It sank. But what about the iceberg? The iceberg didn't sink because it couldn't. Water has a rare quality. When it freezes, it is even lighter than when it's a liquid. This means it is naturally buoyant.
There's certainly an almost deranged logic to it.
Ice might float, but as our high-tech test is about to show, ice is not ideally suited to your typical combat situation. Say it gets hit by a bomb. It shatters. No surprise there. Ice has a crystalline structure, which makes it very brittle. And brittle is bad when you're being shot at with high explosives. But Pike had thought of that. He had a secret ingredient that would solve the problem. A flexible substance which is a natural insulator, which can physically bolster ice's crystalline structure. A truly miraculous material called sawdust.
The idea really is to exploit the sort of properties of two different materials and combine them together.
Pound for pound, the new material was as strong as concrete, and as we can see, it's impervious to massive strength. They called it Pykrete. Lord Louis Mountbatten, the Chief of Combined Operations, was seriously excited by this crazy idea. He hightailed it over to Winston Churchill's residence with a block of Pykrete, but the Prime Minister was in the bath.
He walked into the bathroom and he dropped a hunk of this stuff into the bath with Winston Churchill.
A hot bath was ideal to demonstrate Pykrete's final ace in the hole. Incredibly, after half an hour, the block still hadn't melted. This is because wood is one of the best natural insulators in the world.
The way the heat goes through it is broken down. And every time you come to a little piece of sawdust in it, it's like a little blanket, keeping the next bit cold for a long time.
Churchill thought this was great stuff. So he said, let's go with a project.
Churchill was so impressed that he and Mountbatten took the plan to a top-level meeting with the U.S. military. Mountbatten had a sales pitch that would silence anyone who dared doubt the wisdom of a ship made of ice.
He fired a bullet into the Pykrete.
A pistol bullet travels at over 400 miles an hour and can punch a hole through a steel helmet at 100 yards. But it can't break Pykrete.
The bullet ricocheted everywhere.
The ricochet grazed an admiral's pants and wound up in the wall. The Pykrete survived. Pike's unsinkable ice ship got the green light. Then, as history reveals, everyone got a little carried away. The Admiralty wanted a torpedo-proof hull 40 feet thick. The Fleet Air Arm wanted a deck 2,000 feet long for their heavy bombers. And the Navy wanted a rudder 100 feet high. It would be twice as big as a modern aircraft carrier. But they forgot one thing. To build this monster, they would need enormous refrigeration plants to cool the Pykrete to minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. And what are refrigeration plants made out of? The same rare material that had prompted the research in the first place. Steel.
It actually took more steel to build and refrigerate the thing than it did to actually make a ship of steel.
There simply wasn't enough spare steel available to make a ship whose chief virtue was that it wasn't made out of steel. The idea of an ice ship simply melted away.
Close but no cigar.
Genius, especially in weird warfare, knows no bounds. The kind of mind that comes up with a ship of ice is hardly going to let practicality get in the way. Throughout modern history, some of the craziest ideas have involved animals. And when it comes to using animals in weapons, weird warriors have really pushed the boundaries. Even so, with the onset of the Cold War, things got a little out of hand. It's the 1950s. Everyone in Europe fears a surprise attack from the Russian army. So one idea is to take landmines to a whole new level. It's an idea that will involve nuclear weapons and warm poultry. Enter Operation Blue Peacock.
The story behind the Blue Peacock project is kind of a story about a perfectly reasonable idea that goes quite right off the rails.
That is, if you consider using nuclear bombs as landmines a reasonable idea.
They would bury a series of 10-kiloton nuclear weapons along the border of East and West Germany.
These massive nuclear weapons would be triggered by an electronic timer. But there was one small problem.
It didn't work when it got cold.
Electronic conductors are sensitive to freezing temperatures, and it gets very cold on this border in winter. But great military minds don't give up that easily.
How do you keep them warm?
They first tried thermal blankets. Didn't work.
I suppose it could be some type of electronic heating device, or it could be a living, breathing animal that provides warmth and energy from its body.
Bingo!
They decided to surround them with chickens.
And it was chickens.
The thinking behind this was simple. Chickens are warm-blooded creatures. Really warm. The average body heat of a chicken is 107 degrees Fahrenheit. If you put 40 chickens in a box, they raise its temperature by 8 degrees. So chickens could be used as natural insulators.
That's just crazy. How do you keep the chickens alive? How do you keep the chickens from escaping? How do you keep the chickens from pecking away at the bomb and disabling it? What do you do with all the chicken manure that they're going to be spreading around?
Plans for the defense of the free world had clearly gotten carried away. Luckily, someone, somewhere, did a reality check. Taking massive tanks out with the help of warm poultry might sound stupid, but as we'll see, there is a long and ridiculous history of using animals in weird warfare. From pigeon-guided bombs to mosquitoes of mass destruction, weird warriors have tried every kind of trick to turn animals into weapons, including turning man's best friend into a canine tank buster. It is World War II, and the Nazis are running rampant across the Eastern Front. Tanks are still the problem. This time, it's the Russians who are trying to stop the Nazis in Hitler's Panzer Division. But everything they try gets blown away before it even comes close.
The German tanks were phenomenal. They were very capable, and they were wreaking havoc. And you've got the problem, how do you knock out a tank? They didn't have all the munitions you may have now as anti-tank munitions. How do you take this weapon out of the battlefield?
The best way to bomb a tank is from underneath. And to do this, the Russians needed a guidance system with speed, agility, and intelligence. Meet Shadow. Shadow is going to help us demonstrate how the Russians trained their dogs. Their trainers use a technique called positive reinforcement, made famous by the experiments of Ivan Pavlov and his dogs in 1927. After completing a task, Shadow is given a reward, which makes him want to do it again. The Russians trained the dogs to complete a series of tasks. Run under an enemy tank, drop a bomb, run back.
It's called chaining. He has to look at the tank. He has to follow the man. He has to run. He has to run quickly. He has to dive under the tank. You would train these operations, sequentially or by themselves, and then chain them together where the reinforcer is given at the end.
It's the next bit that gets really dangerous.
Need to pop this on him.
Yeah.
In what today would be seen as animal cruelty, the dog carries a 26-pound mine in a jacket strapped on its back.